All right, welcome back, and this is Realize the Self. I'm your host, Mark, and in today's episode, I thought it would be good to go over more of the Egyptian mystery schools and to expound upon what we covered in the last show. So let's quickly go over uh, the Egyptian mystery schools and how it relates to self-realization. One of the theories that I have is that they were an extension of the Vedic teachings on self-realization, and a lot of these structures and temples were actually initiatory places for people to realize the self. And the reason I say this is because with self-realization, that's the pinnacle, that's the epic, that's the top, it's everything. Once you realize the self, there's nothing else. It's the secret of all secrets, the goal of all goals. It's everything. And so that's how it led me to really conclude this. And then after traveling in those ancient places like India and Egypt and Greece, I could see this same motif, this same self-realization take place, or kind of like these similarities between these different countries. So let's go over the Egyptian mystery schools. They were temple-based priestly education and initiation systems, not schools in the modern sense, whose purpose was to transform consciousness, preserve cosmic order, and prepare select individuals for ritual, governance, and immortality rites. These mystery schools were generally for the priestly class and the ruling class and a select few. These were not for the normal people like we talked about. The Egyptian mystery schools, they functioned as religious institutions, scientific and philosophical centers, ethical training centers, initiatory paths for spiritual realization. Only a small elite had access to the deepest levels. Purpose of the Egyptian mystery schools, there's a cosmic purpose called maintaining Ma'at, and the primary purpose was not personal enlightenment alone or self-realization, but there was more to it. Sustaining cosmic order between gods, humans, nature, and the dead. Every ritual, ethical discipline, and initiation served this aim. Self-realization was valuable because an awakened being stabilized the cosmos. The human purpose, transformation of consciousness. At the individual level, the schools aim to transform a person into an Akh, A-K-H, Akh, a being who is self-aware, ethically integrated, conscious beyond bodily death, capable of effective action in subtle realms. This is explicitly stated in pyramid and coffin texts. Political purpose, creating legitimate authority, is another reason for the mystery schools. Pharaohs and high officials were initiated into divine kingship, trained to rule as embodiments of Ma'at, ritual mediators between heaven and earth. Kingship without initiation was considered illegitimate. It's fascinating because they often, if I'm not wrong, they thought themselves as gods, or at least representing God, which kind of makes sense because with self-realization, you essentially understand that the self, that Brahman, that the divine spark is God, is everything, and you are that, you are that. So it kind of makes sense in one regard, but the division, the separation from the upper echelons, from the priestly and king class to the normal servants and regular everyday people, it wasn't ideal. I think everyone should at least know who they are and at least have the opportunity to realize the self. When did the mystery schools exist? A very interesting question. Rather than one system, they evolved over 3,000 years. Chronologically, the Old Kingdom, 2600 to 2100 BCE, is when the pyramid texts occur. Initiatory afterlife knowledge restricted to the kings in Heliopolis and Memphis, they were prominent. The Middle Kingdom from 2100 to 1700 BCE, the coffin texts democratized initiation to nobility. Abdo-Osirian mysteries expanded, clear ethical and psychological emphasis. The New Kingdom, 1550 to 1070 BCE, the temple initiations were highly developed. by this time. In Thebes, Amun dominant. Ritual drama, dream incubation, darkness, rites, and rituals. Late period in Ptolemaic Egypt, 700 to 30 BCE. This was Isis and Osiris mysteries open to foreigners. Greek philosophical integration, Hermetic traditions emerges. There's continuous institutional evidence across all periods. Now, what evidence do we have? This is the most important section. Where do we get all this knowledge, these ideas, this data? Where do we get this? Because this is very important. We get them actually from the temple complexes such as Karnak, Luxor, Abydos, Philae, and Sais. Architectural features consistent with initiation, the hypostyle halls, which is progressive darkness, inner sanctuaries, restricted access, processional routes, ritual journey. There's textual evidence from the pyramid text, roughly 2400 BCE, the coffin text, Book of the Dead, temple inscriptions describing purification, secrecy, oaths, and progressive revelation. These texts are instructional, not mythic stories. So this is not myth, this is actually did happen. There's indirect but strong evidence from priestly titles. Egyptian inscriptions mention master of secrets, he who knows the hidden things, pure one of the house of light. These are initiatory ranks, not poetic metaphors. There's the house of life per Ankh, documented institutions attached to temples, centers of learning, medical, astronomical, theological instruction, restricted access knowledge. Most scholars agree these function as advanced training centers. We also have Greek testimony, secondary, but they're very important. Greek writers consistently report Egyptian initiations such as Herodotus. In the 5th century BCE, he describes secret rites and prohibitions. He has a whole thing on Egypt. It's a great book, and I forgot the name of the book. What is his? Just check out Herodotus, in a very popular book. There's also Plutarch, who details Osiris initiations. There's Diodorus Siculus, confirms ritual secrecy and staged revelations. There's Iamblichus, connects Egyptian rites to theurgy. These writers were outsiders but independent of each other. What we do not have, we also need to make clear, is there's no single text labeled Mystery School Manual. There's no explicit public description of full initiation sequences. These were secret for a reason. There's no unbroken lineage documents. This absence is expected in secret traditions. But we could put together a large core of it related to the scientific aspect, such as the change in brain waves, and we can really grasp what they did and put it together in today's day and age and make a really similar program, and that's what I talk about in the book. So there's famous historical figures associated with Egyptian mysteries, and we must separate attested, probable, and legendary. So historically, we have Egyptian pharaohs, all legitimate kings initiated into Osirian and solar rites. We have the high priests of Amun, Ta, and Thoth. Titles explicitly reference secret knowledge, lived with temple precinct. And then we have the probable evidence based on multiple sources, such as Pythagoras. Oh, Pythagoras is a phenomenal one. I talk about him in the book as well. And there's ancient sources say he studied in Egypt for close to 20 years. He has doctrines, number mysticism, purification, silence, closely parallel Egyptian practices. And there's actually evidence that shows that actually he went to India too. He got the Pythagorean theorem from one of the Vedic texts. We're going to go, I think we should do a whole show on Pythagoras one of these days, or at least some of these amazing Greek historians that went to India and Egypt. And then we have Plato explicitly states Egyptian priests preserved ancient wisdom. His metaphysics align strongly with Egyptian cosmology. Then we have later initiatory tradition. These claims appear in Hellenistic, Hermetic, or esoteric sources, not archaeologically, such as Solon, Thales, Orpheus, and Moses, who is mentioned in some Jewish and Greco-Egyptian texts. These are possible but not not super reliable. And then we have Roman era initiates, well attested, such as Plutarch initiated into the Isis mysteries. We have Apuleius, Apuleius, describes Isis initiation in the golden ass. This is our clearest first-person initiation account. I hope that's historically accurate, because it's going to sound really funny mentioning the golden ass. I will sound like a golden ass if that's not true. Okay, we have 6. Were these mystery schools like Greek ones? So were the Egyptian and Greek mystery schools similar? Basically, they were a prototype for the Greek Eleusinian, Orphic, and later Hermetic mystery schools, which borrowed the same structure, symbolism, and the goal of immortality through gnosis. There we go. Gnosis, the realization of the self. The thing is, Egypt emphasized ethical purity, cosmic responsibility, integration of life, death, and governance. And what we know for certain is Egypt had graded secret temple-based initiation systems. They trained consciousness, ethics, and ritual mastery. They existed for over 3,000 years. They profoundly influenced Greek philosophy. And some of the hidden aspects that we do not know is the exact initiation sequences, but we can make a lot of pieces come together in a puzzle and actually see a lot of things. Inner experiential instructions we don't have the full symbolic meanings. They're intentionally encoded, and that hiddenness was actually the point. And so a little bit further, we could talk about a probable Egyptian initiation path. Yeah, why not? So there's the first stage is qualification and selection. So there's strong evidence for this. You need to be moral reputation, ritual purity, such as dietary, sexual, and behavioral, psychologically stable, often heredity, priestly lineage. Later periods they open to more wider, and we have evidence for this on the temple inscriptions on purity, titles like Pure One of the House of Life, Greek accounts of long preparation. This initiation was dangerous if you were not prepared. And so I wouldn't say self-realization is dangerous if you're unprepared. This is like for full-on, like a psychedelic type of experience. You know, if you really go to the full extreme, you can have a full transcendental experience if you do what they did. You know, these long days of dark light retreats. If you purify the body, if you go through, if you chant for long periods of time, and if you have sleep deprivation, if you do long periods of fasting, and it's all scientifically founded upon, foundationally based. And so a next stage would be the purification, which is the outer court initiation. There's a strong evidence for this. There's like water purification rites, fasting, periods of silence, instruction in Ma'at and myth. Architecture, the open courts, ablution basins, they have the evidence for, and then the inner transformation, there's ethical stabilization, ego softening, social identity loosening. Stage 2 is the instruction in sacred knowledge. A lot of strong evidence for this, and the content would be the cosmology, such as Ra, Osiris, and Duat, sacred speech, Heka, and symbol literacy, the hieroglyphs as living forces, ritual movement, and chant. Institutions such as the House of Life per Ankh, inner transformation, cognitive restructuring, symbolic thinking replaces literal thinking. And Egypt emphasized symbol as reality, not metaphor. Stage 3 is veiling and threshold. This was such as in the apostyle hall, a status archaeologically evident, ritually inferred. There's physical evidence and reality for progressively darker halls, forest of calms, veils, curtains, gates. They would blindfold or low light movement, call and response passwords, invocation of guardians. The inner meaning of this was to disorientate or sensory dominance, sensory deprivation. Initiate learns not to trust surface perception. This is the origin of the veil tradition. Then we have stage 4, darkness initiation, the inner chamber. strong inference supported by Greek testimony. So the practice is prolonged isolation and darkness, sensory deprivation, fasting, dream incubation. All these work to help manipulate the brainwaves, and from all this stuff, as they go deeper, they could help one to realize the self through these deep transcendental experiences. I mean, you could have one. All you got to do is sit down, meditate for like 5 hours, half the night, and just about anyone can have one of these transcendental experiences where you go into experience a bright light, you feel immersed in love. And so it won't last long unless you do all these purification rituals. Then that will increase the length of it. Or you might not even experience it unless you have at least some form of purification. I know when I first had a momentary, short enlightenment type of self-realization type of experience that lasted, I don't know, less than a minute probably, is when I changed my diet and I started eating really healthily. I switched from a fast food diet to a vegetarian diet for a period of time, and that's when one of the prerequisites, I guess you could call it, as just a purification that I just naturally did. And from there I meditated a few hours, from like 11 to 2 in the morning, or it was 10 to 1 in the morning, until I was barely breathing, and I was on that edge of that dream state, but I didn't sleep. I just blasted off into the divine spark, the self right here, and it looked like a bright light, like the sun times infinity, and just felt love and bliss throughout my entire body and every cell of my body. And that is the self, and we can't walk around this life in that state. It wouldn't be possible. I mean, you look at some advanced yogis and they're just lay down in a comatose like state, and they're taken care of by their helpers, but we can't do that in today's day and life. But what we can do is have a lighter connection to the self, and know who we are, know that we're the awareness within, and disattach ourselves from the mind and the body. And so that tangent, that was a good tangent. Now back to the textual support for the darkness initiation. We have the pyramid texts that reference the hidden, the unseen, the night abode of Ra, inner transformation, the ego dissolution, encounter with fear, death, imaginary, spontaneous, visionary states from all that. And that's not difficult to do with what we know now and all the science that supports that. They had initiation through direct experience, not teaching. Stage 5 was death and Osirian rebirth, strongly supported by Osiris cult evidence, the ritual, symbolic death, laying in a coffin, mummy posture, recitation of resurrection texts, declaration, you are not dead, you are not died. Inner meaning, the inner meaning is identity collapse, realization of awareness beyond form. There we go. The equivalent in the Greek mystery schools of the Eleusian Epoptia, the great vision. And then stage 6, revelation of the hidden light. There we go. Now we're talking. And so with that, we have the practice is sudden illumination, a lamp, sunshaft, or gold image, revelation of deity, image or symbol, silent witnessing. Inner effect is non-dual insight. There we go. The self is non-dual. This world, this reality, this Maya, this dream world we exist in is dual. That's why every thought or every word cannot adequately express the self, because it is dual and the self is non-dual. It could only be experienced. It could only be you can only experience it. You can't really communicate it properly or effectively, but we do our best. And there's all these teachings that we can actually listen to that can help us realize the self, just with those words, those koans that get the brain to basically go silent, and then you get a moment of realization from that. And so when it talks about revelation of the hidden light, this moment was never described publicly. It had to be kept secret. And even the Greek mystery schools, and even the Gnostics talked about the divine spark and gnosis. And stage 7, return as the Ak, AKH. Pardon my, if I'm not saying it right, I'm not well versed in Egyptian, so I just read it as it looks. Okay, the status is textually supported. The outcome's a new name or title. It's like a rebirth, a new ritual, responsibilities, vow of secrecy. The goal is not to escape from the world, but be effective within it. So once you experience the divine spark, the self, it's not as a means of escapism. Like, you don't want to generally go to a mountain in the Himalayas and just live the rest of your life in a cave. You have to come back and live in life and be effective in life and do what we're supposed to do in this life. And so it's not a form of escapism. You need to, you can experience it and then come back with it. And so, yeah, the next one would be, we could talk about the Egyptian veils, the traditions, the uniqueness of Egypt, but I think that's good enough for now. We could expound upon it at a later time. I think 20 minutes is enough. There's so much information. I want to go over the Greek mystery schools here eventually too, and a few other things such as diet here. Let's go over the diet really quick. So this is super important, and this is super, can be very effective just on a level that anyone can do. So diet, the average diet, let's say in America predominantly, and a lot of the world, is a processed and ultra processed diet. According to the Center for Disease Control in the US from 2021 to 2023, up to 55% of the American diet comes from ultra processed foods, which is high sugar, unhealthy fats, and chemical additives that dominate the typical American diet. And so we've all heard the saying, you are what you eat. So high consumption of junk food contributes to a junk mind, a junk body, and a diminished ability to realize the self. This is directly from my book. I wrote this in the book. There's so much great stuff from this. And so the foods, this ultra high processed foods, they promote inflammation, disrupt gut biome, disrupt the gut microbiota, increase the risk of chronic disease, and cause dopamine spikes that elevate beta brainwaves, which further distances one from the self. Not to say self-realization is reliant on any one brainwave, but if you're just starting and you want to realize the self, you have a desire to realize the self, any little bit can help and make a difference. And so once you need that reference point, so you need to understand beyond understanding, beyond the mind, what the self is and who you are. So to realize the self, a point of stillness would be needed. And so these foods cause the opposite of stillness. They cause addiction. They cause dopamine spikes. It causes beta brainwaves. So this causes like an agitation. So it makes it more challenging to realize the self. And the self is like stillness. Stillness is the self. But when you know that, then, I mean, I'm not saying eat processed and junk foods after. I think you should always eat healthily to preserve the body and to reduce chronic disease and suffering for your own self. But you can get away with it a little bit more, and actually you can observe the body and the mind's the effects from that junk food. So basically, many of these foods that we consume are actually addictive on purpose. They're addictive as drugs, particularly sugar, which has been shown to mimic the effects of opiates. Needless to say, diet profoundly impacts brainwaves. And from an article of Vanna and Hobel, 2008, the theory is formulated that intermittent excessive intake of sugar can have dopaminergic, cholinergic, and opiate effects that are similar to psychostimulants and opiates, albeit similar in magnitude. So what we're talking here is food can be a cure, or it can be, it could help you realize the self, or it could help you distance from the self. But it could also be a cure or a curse, I guess you could make the case for as well. There's no coincidence. It's no coincidence that those who consume excess junk and processed foods carry a restless mind, trapped in an elevated brainwave state of beta. The diet of the body mirrors the diet of the mind. By nourishing the body with natural, minimally processed foods, one lays the groundwork for a clear mind, steadier emotions, and a more direct path to self-realization. Food can be a medicine, or it can be a subtle form of bondage, a tool for liberation, or a chain to fleeting sensory pleasures. Choose wisely, for the body is the vessel through which the self experiences and realizes the self. The body is the temple of the self. Keep it clean and sacred. And so with that, thank you for being here. I hope you got something out of this, and we'll see you on the next one.